Hello, my name is Ascian Fire, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different, or I guess talk about something a little bit different? I don't know. So today I wanted to talk about something a little different. There are other things I've wanted to talk about for ages, but I still haven't gotten around to. But this has definitely been on my mind recently, and I just wanted to discuss it for a bit. For those of you who haven't really realized it yet, even though it really should be transparently obvious given the last 20 videos on my channel have largely been Final Fantasy XIV related. Last 22. The simple fact of the matter is, Final Fantasy XIV is quite frankly my favorite game of all time at this point. Because believe it or not, even though this channel for most of its history has been dedicated to strategy games and sort of base building games, stuff like that. Even though the majority of content of this channel is dedicated to that sort of thing, my favorite kinds of games, the games that absolutely always rank as my favorite games of all time, are games with good stories. Games with good stories, good characters, and good world building. Usually some combination of those three done really well will absolutely capture me. That'll capture my heart, basically. Like I have a heart. And Final Fantasy XIV has literally just skyrocketed to the top of that list. Like 2 years ago, I would have said it was like in the top 5, kind of nebulously. But ever since the release of Shadowbringers a year ago, don't know why the letter F decided to stop working in my mouth all of a sudden. Ooh, I don't like that sentence either. Anyway, Final Fantasy XIV, though, has absolutely made it to the #1 spot. And, I mean, why not? If you haven't played it before, you're really not going to understand why I like the game so much. And if you're the sort of person who likes gameplay more than anything else in a game, this might not be 100% your cup of tea. It's not that it's... not bear in mind, not that the game plays badly by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that in general, in terms of content, 14 can be a little bit hit and miss. For me, in a lot of ways, the game actually is a bit of a miss. And the real reason that I play the game so much is because the story and the world. I am so committed to seeing the story and the world and the characters reach their conclusion that, yes, I keep playing the game and I don't stop. And that is the entire reason I really play the game. I'm not saying, of course, again, that that's the only reason one should play the game. If the game had bad gameplay, I'd probably be a lot less inclined to play, even if it did have a good story. But because the gameplay for me, at least, because the gameplay and the content for me, at least, is decent, and the story is really good, that is enough for me to get a lot of mileage out of it. And today I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that have happened in the game, about some of the lore, and about some of my observations about the lore. Because it gets really interesting, especially with Shadowbringers, Prior to this point, I wouldn't say that the game had bad storytelling or anything, but Shadowbringers definitely brought it to a next level. Because Basically, I guess you would call it promotion. They promoted one of their best writers, the one who made the quest line for the Dark Knights. They promoted her to be the primary story writer for Shadowbringers, and it really shows. Because she's really good at tying things together, and she's very good at kind of exploring character and personalities. And kind of bringing out the complexities of characters and ideas and so forth. And that hallmark is all over Shadowbringers. That hallmark is all over Shadowbringers, just like it was all over the Dark Knight quests and all over like the Azim Steppes in Stormblood. If you don't know, the Azim Steppes are a subsection of the Stormblood main story, with Stormblood being the prior expansion. Gosh, so much of this is so weird because I'm explaining this like people who don't know Final Fantasy XIV are going to be watching this, because my channel is not dedicated to Final Fantasy XIV by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, I feel like only Final Fantasy XIV players are really going to be watching this, so it feels like explaining all this is kind of pointless in its way. So, I guess discussing Shadowbringers. I think one of my favorite aspects of this expansion, and it's a lot of people's favorite aspects, I think, too, is the way that the Ascians, the villains, have been expanded upon in this expansion. You know, prior to this point, the Ascians were basically just cartoon villains. Let's be honest with ourselves. You know, in 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0, Ascians were purely just kind of cartoon villains. They were very straightforward. They were just... I mean, there were hints in Heavensward, but there wasn't a lot... But it wasn't, like, really explored or expounded upon why the Ascians were doing what they were doing. The only thing we knew they were doing was... It was basic... Okay, completely lost my train of thought just now. The only thing we knew for certain is that the Ascians were attempting the rejoinings to resurrect Zodiark, but we did not know why. We did not know what their purpose was. And in Shadowbringers, of course, we learn through Emmett Selk that it's all because the Ascians want to restore the old world. We learn that there is an old world to begin with. We learn that there is a past history to the world that we live in that is much broader and more expansive than we ever realized. And that is more than a little shocking, I guess is the best way to put it. If I'm being honest, it's kind of shocking. You know, it was a twist that I think some people kind of predicted, but no one knew for certain. You know, no one was gonna. You know, even if we all thought there was a greater purpose to what the Ascians were doing, I doubt anyone expected that their motives. At the end of the day, actually, their motivation is not bad. Their motivation isn't evil. They're committing. You know, the Ascians committed, you know, great evil in their attempts, but the simple fact of the matter is, committing evil and actually being evil are two completely different things. And that's certainly the case of the Ascians. It's a very gray territory, an alarmingly gray territory, because all things considered, the Ascians have destroyed 7 worlds. The Ascians have destroyed 7 worlds and slaughtered untold millions of people, right? You know, directly and indirectly through their actions. And yet somehow the story has been written in such a way that you don't necessarily sympathize, but you certainly empathize with why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. And at the end of 5.3, at the end of all of this, you know, at the end of all this story, you kind of just realize that more than anything, you pity the Ascians. You don't, you know, you no longer see them as the dark villains that you once thought of them as. You only see them as individuals worth pitying, because they have been for thousands of years now trying to restore the world they once knew. And it's like a mission that is so far distantly removed from anything they once knew that you wonder why they're even still going. I mean, it could be the fact that they're immortal. But, I mean, it's like, that probably has something to do with it. When you're immortal, time is kind of immaterial. But, at the same time, you kind of wonder, what's the point? But to say that you pity them, you don't pity them in their entirety. Like, you pity La Habrea and you pity Elidibus, but you don't really pity Emmett Selk. In a broader sense, you kind of almost, in a broader sense, you respect Emmett Selk, if you ask me. Because if you really think about it, at the end of the day, Emmett Selk was like the last sane man in the room. You know, you had all the, because in Shadowbringers, it establishes that you have the 3 Unsunder, La Habrea, Elidibus, and Emmett Selk. But Emmett Selk is the only one who's actually completely sane and rational anymore. is, I think, kind of in a slightly overlooked element of the main scenario in Shadowbringers. Emmett Silk mentions at one point that basically La Habrea is kind of unmoored. Like, because basically what Ascians can do is they can jump into bodies and possess them. And that's what La Habrea does, a lot. And Emmett Silk pretty much outright tells you that because La Habrea does it a lot. La Habrea does it a lot, and it basically kind of leaves him kind of unmoored, and it kind of leaves him weaker than the other two. Which I think is also, I think that explanation was created also to explain why La Habrea was so much weaker than either Emmett Silk or Elidibus. And I think that's just an interesting little something that I think might get a little bit overlooked if you're not really thinking about it. If you're not thinking about it, you don't realize, oh, this is why he's like, this is why this is why La Habrea is weaker. This is why he comes across as a little bit of as a cartoon villain. And it's a good explanation too. The fact that he jumps bodies so much. I think it's entirely reasonable and understandable explanation in universe and in context. Because by and large, obviously Emmett Silk is probably the most powerful of the Ascians. And then Elidibus gains a lot of power by taking advantage of the fact that he's a primal. Something that we learn in 5.3. And then there's little La Habrea over here. But at the end of the day, of course, I kind of go off on a tangent there, but I was making the point that Emmett Silk is the last sane man in the room, because he's the only one who fully remembers what he's doing. He's the only one who is committed to what he's doing for the exact personal reasons that he wants to. Everything Emmett Silk is doing, he's doing completely cogently and rationally. Unlike La Habrea, again, who is kind of mad, and Elidibus, who has basically forgotten. And I thought that was also really interesting. In fact, they decided to go the sympathy route with Elidibus as well. I mean, I guess in a lot of ways there was not much choice, because, I mean, if you made Emmett Silk of all people, relatable, then you have to make Elidibus relatable too. Because otherwise, you can't have them all, you can't have cartoon villains and then Emmett Silk, oh, but they have the same mission, but Emmett Silk, that wouldn't work. That would just be vaguely ridiculous, I would tend to think. I don't see how you could do that any other way. But it was good. It was done very well, and that's something I think that's worth noting. And if you really think about it, it has to be kind of a sad existence for Emmett Silk as well. It has to be sad to be the only one who truly fully understands what he's doing. He had to be lonely, frankly. If you really think about it, because everyone he knew is gone outside of La Habrea and Elidibus, and he's the only one who's actually completely cogent and sane, and that has to be depressing. If anything, more than anything, that has to be really depressing. And I kind of wonder. I'm not sure if I ever, just thinking about it now, I'm not sure if I ever put any real stock in the idea that Emmett Silk was deliberately trying to end his journey, his attempt to restore the old world, because after thousands and thousands of years of rejoinings and machinations and so forth, well, why would he give it up now? But maybe that is exactly why. Maybe it's kind of reached a point where he looks at Elidibus and he looks at La Habrea, and then he looks at himself, and maybe he realizes that after all this time, it's time to stop. But he doesn't want to stop if it's not worth stopping. And so he looks to you, the champion of Hydaelyn, on the source, and he sees you, and it's like, does she possess, or he, I say she because of course, Lisha, Of course, it's Lisha. To me, the Warrior of Light and Zem by extension are going to be female. But he looks at the Warrior of Light and he looks at her and he says, "Well, she, is she the potential champion I'm looking for?" And that's what the whole Emmett Silk aspect of the Shadowbringers main story is about. That's what it's all about. He's looking to see if you can carry on in his absence. Because if you're too weak, then he will continue the mission. That is just the simple fact of the matter. If the Warrior of Light is too weak, he will carry out his mission to its conclusion. And that is entirely reasonable, I think, at the end of the day, for him. From his perspective, that is entirely reasonable. Of course, to us, the Ascians ultimately kind of come across as mad. But, if you can't make the world of the future worth saving, then he will just restore the world of old. And that's why he keeps pushing you. That's why he keeps looking at you. He's looking at you absorb all this light aspected ether as you destroy the oh my gosh, I forgot what they're called. The Sin Eaters, the head honcho. Oh my god, how did I forget what they're called? The Light Wardens, got it. Totally forgot what they were called for a second. But again, it has been a year since I've had to fight one technically, so for the story, so I didn't have to think about what they were called at all. But yeah, and when you're too weak to contain all that ether, he's telling you, he tells you outright that he thinks that you're not worthy and expects you to succumb, and then you keep pushing. And I think ultimately what Emmett Silk decides is that I think that what Emmett Silk ultimately decides is that what he's going to do is push you to your very limit. He's going to reveal the full, its full strength as Hades. And he's going to fight you with everything he has. And in so doing, he will prove one way or the other whether or not you are actually worthy of basically being his successor. And I think that's really neat. And it's funny, before 5.3, I didn't really buy into that idea. I thought that Emmett Silk was still fully committed to his mission and his goal of the rejoinings and resurrecting Zodiark and bringing back the old world, if that is at all possible even. I suspect it is, but I mean, the cost of it, I think, was obviously way too steep. But now I think about it, maybe he wasn't, especially because as 5.3 reveals, he laid all these little breadcrumbs around his reconstructed Amarat, which assuming I did this right, I should be walking around right now in his reconstructed Amarat for you to learn more about the creation of Zodiark and the divide and the convocation, and how Azem specifically, the 14th member of the convocation who did not agree to the summoning of Zodiark, basically the revelation of all these things. He laid these little breadcrumbs, and as Y'shtola posits, the idea that maybe he did it so that you could face Elidibus and actually defeat him. Because obviously during the Warrior of Light, during the Seed of Sacrifice trial, it's Emmett Silk in his ancient form who appears and brings you back from that null void, where Elidibus intends on trapping you. And it's just like, well, wait, if he orchestrated it this entire time, well, obviously he planned for everything. He planned for every contingency. Obviously, if he won in if he won in your battle against him, then, well, it wouldn't matter, right? It wouldn't matter what he was, it wouldn't matter what he did with the reconstructed Amarat. But if you won, then making sure there was a way out for his compeer was of paramount importance, because if Elidibus has forgotten the purpose of the mission, then there's no point in Elidibus continuing the mission. Because what is Elidibus going to do if he succeeds in one last rejoining, but doesn't remember what the hell he's supposed to do with that last rejoining? But yeah, but that's just been on my mind, and I don't know, I just wanted to bring it out in words. It'd probably be better if I wrote it, because I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, or maybe I should have written a script. But I'm always bad if I'm scripted. Then I'm not gonna come across as naturally, and I will also forget things when I script things too. Whereas if I do kind of a rambly rant, that sounds funny. But whereas if I rant, then it's a lot more. I feel like it's a lot more It's a lot more organic. Sorry, this is that hello is definitely not going to be synced up to anything that just happened on the screen. I am currently, because I'm going to edit this a little bit differently than I'm recording it, and it's just going to be just like, but I'm currently walking around Amarat, the reconstruction right now, and I'm just and something happened and it caught me off guard. Anyway. But yeah, so I think it's all very interesting. I think it's sad too. I think the story of Elidibus is very sad, because I think everyone completely misinterprets why Elidibus is depicted as a child right after you defeat him. Because a lot of people, I think, literally think he was a child. No, he was not added as a convocation as a child. It tells you, when you're walking around Amarat during the end of the original 5.0 story, and all the constructs, all the little sort of pseudo constructs of the ancients look at you and they see a child, they treat you very condescendingly. If we're being honest, they're very condescending towards you. The ancients treat you very condescendingly, though. They treat you like you are a child. And I think that's kind of amusing, because basically to the ancients you look like a child, even though you, the warrior of light, and your companions, assuming you think you have companions, there's, I guess, your companions. Yes, your companions. What am I thinking? God, it's not like Thancred and Oriange and the rest are things of your imagination, right? Anyway, but that was awkward. Anyway, but they look at you, and even though you're full-grown adults, the ancients you look as children. And Elidibus, when he appears at the end, he looks like he's about your size, which means that I think the implication is not that he was a child when he joined the convocation. The implication of that is that it's just that he was very young. He was probably like the youngest member of the convocation. And he was probably so young that he probably didn't really have like any sort of like real life goals or any sort of real purpose or direction at that time, right? He didn't have those things. And so when he became the Heart of Zodiark, he partially did it because he had the least to live. He probably had the least to live for, not in the dark sort of way, but in the, he's really young still, so he doesn't have a lot of purpose yet. He hasn't found a drive or an ambition. So he became the Heart of Zodiark for that reason. And he also probably became the Heart because of his general sense of duty. Which we see he is admonished for during an Echo flashback. And it's that kind of innocence, that kind of almost lack of self that Elidibus contains that I think make us empathize with him and empathize with why Emet-Selch might create a scenario in which we might actually, hopefully, successfully defeat Elidibus. But yeah, this has been an interesting journey, and now of course that particular journey is over. As they said, this 5.3 basically brought an end to the tale of Hydaelyn and Zodiark. I'm sure like it will still be relevant in some way or another, but like the primary plot, like the mission of the Unsundered Ascians and everything, I guess is basically over since there are no more Unsundered Ascians. And now, of course, we're going to move on to the source, and we're back to fighting the Empire and everything. And I guess in fighting the Empire, undoing the last major work of the Ascians, because, of course, the creation of the Garlean Empire was done by Emmet Selk himself, who is the actual founder of the Empire. But I'll be interested to see what direction that goes. Because, of course, there's another Ascian in the mix now, Fandaniel. But I'm interested to see where that actually... I'm assuming I pronounced that right. I don't remember how it's spelled. Admittedly, I mispronounce things when I see them spelled, and I don't really think about how they're actually going to be pronounced. Kind of like how people pronounce my own name, my actual name. But yeah. I'll be interested to see, actually, if a lot of things that we've seen in Shadowbringers get reincorporated into the general story. Of... Because obviously we're moving towards a confrontation with Xenos and Fandaniel and the Garlean Empire. And how will these things be... incorporated? You know, how will they unfold, I guess, is the best way to put it. Because I feel like there's more of the past to be told, frankly. I think there's more to... Obviously, there's more to learn about with regards to Amarat and the Ancients and the civilization that precede... You know, that very first civilization that was destroyed in the final days, and then fractured apart by the conflict between Hydaelyn and Zodiark. And I think especially the one question that I think we really need answered is what caused the final days? Because surely the fabric of reality didn't just tear itself apart on a whim. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Obviously, something had to have happened, whether that was the world itself or some sort of creature from beyond or some sort of entity otherwise. Something had to have happened to cause the final days. You know, something had to cause the cataclysm, that first calamity that destroyed the world of the ancients. And what that is, I think, is an interesting question. And I think I would not make a bet on this because who knows where the story's going to go. It's definitely taken twists and turns that I never expected. That's for sure. But I have a feeling that maybe there's a possibility that it could be incorporated into 6.0. Because there's something, I think here's something that should be taken into consideration. Obviously, Xenos Zosgalvis, I guess now, is completely insane. He's a psychopath and a madman who is purely obsessed with his bloodlust. And it is clear that he will go to horrific lengths just to fight you, the Warrior of Light. You know, he basically sacrificed an entire Imperial Legion between Doma and Alamigo in just to have a confrontation with you. You know, he basically deliberately lost that war just so he could fight you. You know, which means, so that means that there are links, there's basically no length he won't go to have that fight. Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about people, he doesn't care about the Empire, he doesn't care about the world. And I almost wonder if part of the plot isn't that maybe he and maybe through Fandaniel or something aren't going to try and discover whatever caused that very first calamity. You know, discover whatever caused the final days to occur. You know, I wonder if that isn't what's going to happen. I think it's definitely a distinct possibility anyway. You know, because it's clearly established that he's not beyond doing something like it, something imperiling the world in that way. because they've been hinting at this. They've been hinting at the idea that he sees the final days every night in his dreams. He sees the destruction of Amaroth every day and every night in his dreams, which means that he knows that this is an historical, and he knows through the Ascians that this is an historical event. You know, that this isn't just some weird ass dream he's always having. This is an historical event that he is witnessing in his, that he's witnessing over and over again. And I think it's not beyond him to discover, what caused it and maybe try to utilize it to bring you out to fight him. He'll risk the entire world to, he'll risk the entire world just to have a fight with you. And I'd be interested to see where that goes, because I feel like that's where the plot is implicitly going. What exactly that entails, how exactly it's going to pan out, I have no idea. But I think that's where we're going. And I really have nothing else to add to that, really. That's been on my mind too, because it kind of bothers me in a lot of ways, because this story is not, this story's not afraid to go dark. It's not as dark as some games have gone, obviously. It's not as dark as most stories have gone, let's be true, either. But dark things do happen, grim things do happen. Even in side stories, grim things are happening. I mean, let's just look at the Sorrow of Airlight side quest, where we basically have to watch Gaius watch as his foster children are sacrificing themselves one at a time trying to fight you. And it's, that's hard. That's hard, and it's not light fare, the game for the most part is kind of like tonally light. The game is not afraid to be tonally dark, and I think that's part of what makes it so compelling and interesting. Oh gosh, I feel like there's a million other things I could kind of talk about if I really wanted to, but I think I don't want to get too wrapped up in this. I've already been recording for like half an hour. I mean, I'm going to be chopping off like 10 minutes of this just because of all the awkward and the awkward silences and all that I'm very prone to engaging in. But I also don't know why I swore in that. It'd be nice if I didn't swear it in that at all. Maybe I can censor that. Yeah, it's just, I like it. I like this a lot because, just to go back to what I was talking about in the beginning, I like story-based games. I like games that make me think. I like games that make me feel. I like games that make me immersed. I like games that make me feel like I'm part of the world. That it's not just a game I'm playing, but that it's a real living world. I like games and movies and books and everything between that do that sort of thing, because, I mean, it's one of the things that people do best. It's tell stories. It's one of the things that we uniquely do as a species. And I think, I think that's awesome. And I like a good story, and I like a good commitment. I mean, just think about the other games I would consider my all-time favorite games. That would be like the Mass Effect trilogy. Whatever you may say about the way it concluded, for the most part, it was absolutely phenomenal. It was a phenomenal experience. Or Dragon Age Origins, both BioWare games, back when BioWare was actually good. Dragon Age Origins, 80 hours of gameplay, and I have rarely ever been so committed to every action and every choice I had made. Because there's lots of games where I'll make a choice and I'm like, I didn't really like that, and I'll just go back and do the one that I was kind of more favoring, but like the stupid part of my brain's like, no, do the slightly dumber thing. But in Mass Effect and Dragon Age, I fully committed to decisions I made, even when they were unfortunate ones. Like in Mass Effect, I accidentally killed Morden in the suicide mission. Granted, Morden is the most likely to die in the suicide mission anyway, but I accidentally killed him, but I committed to it, and I think, and of course, it made the Tuchanka part of 3 less engaging, but I was still engaged, of course. And then, of course, there's like Fire Emblem 7. Fire Emblem 7 is, the first one released in the United States, is like one of my favorite games of all time because of that story and the characters. And then, like, number 5, even though I think this is actually more like number 4, it actually might even be number 3 above, like, Dragon Age, is the Golden Sun duology. The first 2 Golden Sun games. Again, fantastic stories and amazing plot twists and great characters. It's all fascinating, and I just love these games. And Final Fantasy XIV is right up there with them. Final Fantasy XIV, I think, has surpassed them. I'd be interested to play some of the Final Fantasy games that are said to have the best stories as well. Final Fantasy VI and 9 in particular, I believe, are said to be extremely good in that regard. But of course, I've never had an opportunity because I've never owned the consoles, the requisite consoles, and I have so many games as it is already, and getting emulated games is kind of harder ever since a certain website was, had to shut down, thanks to Nintendo mostly. It's a lot harder to get emulated versions of these games too, but or at least to get them safely, I should say, rather. Final Fantasy XIV is right up there with them. And I'm really looking forward to see where the rest of the Shadowbringers patch cycle and eventually 6.0 bring us. I mean, obviously things are going to be delayed thanks to a certain thing going around, but all the same, I'm really looking forward to it. I may make more videos like this. I may make more videos relating to, like, just observations regarding the lore and the characters and the world of Final Fantasy XIV. But for now, I think I'm done. So I want to thank you for listening to this, if you did. I don't know why you did. You've probably gone clinically insane, because this definitely was a real rambly video. Gosh, it was like me talking about the passing of my father a month ago. But it's nice to do these videos sometimes. It's nice to talk about things that interest me sometimes, because, well, you know what? I need an outlet sometimes, and I don't really have a lot of people who I talk to on a regular basis and talk to about these things on a regular basis in particular. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you're one of my channel fans who does never play Final Fantasy XIV, I absolutely would recommend it, just for the story. If you're like the sort of person who likes story, and for a lot of you, you like the Lord of the Rings. And while I wouldn't say this is the Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth in terms of size and scope, it absolutely is a story that is comparably good, by every metric. And yeah, so that's it. And until next time, everybody, I suppose. Something like that. Bye.